Hello everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome everyone to today's webinar with Austmine. My name is Ross Carter. I'm the Membership Manager for New South Wales, and I'm pleased to host today's webinar, The Community Mind, as part of our ESG Showcase webinar series. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm hosting this webinar from the lands of the Awabakal and Warimi people. I'm in Newcastle. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you all work today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people attending the webinar. Next slide. There is no doubt that meeting societal, client and legislative expectations in the ESG field is critical to the resources sector. When Austmine chaired workshops in these areas at our conference in May, they drew significant interest from miners and METS companies alike. In Austmine fashion, we don't see this as a theoretical debate around what should happen, but we're seeking exemplar cases of ESG success from our members and using that running this series of webinars. The ESG Showcase series provides an opportunity for our members to showcase their solutions while sharing valuable insights, help overcome key ESG challenges and leverage opportunities they present. Covering a range of topics, the ESG webinar series serves as a platform to highlight the innovative solutions, technologies the MET sector is contributing to the mining's sustainable future. As you can see there, the showcase series consists of the community mine, which is our focus today, the smart water mine, the intelligent mine, zero carbon mine, small footprint, and the waste free. We'll highlight the dates for those upcoming series at the end of this presentation. Today we kick off with the community mine, delving into technology and solutions around stakeholder engagement, cultural heritage preservation, diversity, inclusion, governance, to name a few. Okay. Today, we have 4 amazing examples of success from member companies. Joining us today to share their experience, we have Toby Carrigan from PX4 Software, Dan Hillier from VendorPanel, Matt Paul, GeoMoby, and Brian Spence of K2 Fly. The format for today will include a 7-minute presentation by each of our 4 presenters, followed by a 10-minute Q&A session. If you have a question for any of the presenters as we go, please write them in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen that you're looking. We'll then raise them during the Q&A time. The webinar is being recorded and we'll share the recording with all attendees. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Toby Carrigan, General Manager of PX4 Software, to get us started with the presentation. Over to you, Toby.
Thanks very much, Ross. And thank you to Hayley as well and to the team at Austmine for hosting this session today. Really keen to be here and really excited to talk all things PX4. So let's jump in. In terms of a brief agenda for today, sorry, next slide, please, Hayley. In terms of a really brief agenda for today, I want to introduce everyone to PX4. For those of you who haven't yet come across us in the market, I want to talk about how PX4 has expanded from a tenement management based company to a company that really spans a far reach in the ESG realm. I want to introduce significantly the agreements module and the stakeholder communications module, which will be the primary focus of today's session. And I want to talk about the benefits and the value that our clients are getting from these tools. Thanks, Hayley. So in terms of a little bit about PX4, and apologies for some of the formatting in this presentation, that hasn't liked going to Hayley, unfortunately. But in terms of PX4, PX4 is the 3rd iteration of tenement management software that our team have been involved in. And the whole crux of the system historically has been jurisdictionally specific workflows based on tenement management obligations. We've built systems across the whole of Australia, and we now have international solutions across many African countries and many states of the US. Thanks, Hayley. So historically, PX4 has been, I guess, more focused on the governance side of things. Again, with jurisdictionally specific workflows that allow you to demonstrate compliance against your tenement management obligations. All of those workflows that we build are based on the legislation in which you're operating. So it's all about demonstrating governance and compliance against those obligations. And those workflows are very much built by subject matter experts with a really broad approvals and tenement management expertise. Thank you, Hayley. But what I wanted to talk more about today is that, over the last kind of 12 to 18 months, client-driven feedback and client-driven development has identified these two key areas where we see, we've got this tenement being your primary approval and you can't do anything on the ground without that. But that social license to operate is a really critical component to that project getting off the ground. And so we see the agreements and the stakeholder comms modules being a huge step in the right direction for a broader ESG compliance solution. Thanks, Hayley. So in terms of these two modules, our agreements module went live about 12 months ago. And similar to the tenement management solution, it's all about specific and unique workflows that we've built for different types of agreements. So you've got things like your land access agreements, JV obligations, compensation and royalty agreements with stakeholders. And importantly, things like cultural heritage management plans and native title agreements all have their own unique workflows within the system. But the beauty of PX4 is that it allows you to capture information from before the date that you've actually got an agreement signed. So as soon as you know you need to have an agreement with a party on the ground, you can create that agreement within PX4 and start to capture all of the evidence, all of your discussions, and all of your communications from day one. So that kind of allows you to very much see the entirety of that agreement in its context and not just be looking at that agreement at a snapshot in time. But more importantly, that agreement can also be associated with every other entity within PX4. So whenever you're looking at an agreement, you can also see what project is this agreement related to? What tenement am I actually looking at that's associated with this agreement? Who's my landholder? And who's my, what land parcel are we actually talking about? So you really get to see that agreement in context. And with all of those agreements, obviously you can create all of your own actions and follow-ups to ensure that all of your compensation payments and all of your actions are maintained. In terms of our stakeholder communications module, that's all about capturing every stakeholder interaction, again, from day one, so that you've got this really holistic picture of all of your communications with a particular stakeholder. So you imagine a landholder that sits under an exploration license that you've got. From day one, from as soon as you're applying for that exploration license, you can start to record all of your communications with that landholder. And again, a really significant part of this is capturing the human IP. So very rarely do we see the same team operating from an exploration license as it progresses to a mining lease. And so with a different team operating across those different stages of the life cycle, the PX4 stakeholder comms module allows all of those interactions to be captured as they're recorded. So all of that human IP is captured in the system. It also allows you to capture trends and identify trends that are occurring. Have you got a contractor that's constantly leaving the same gate open? Have you got noise complaints always being raised on a Saturday afternoon and things like that? Thanks, Hayley. So I've put in just two really quick snapshots and we're going to blitz through this, but this is just a screen grab out of the PX4 system. And so you can start to see this visual tool that we've developed. And on the left, you can see the various stakeholders to this agreement. And if we jump to the next slide, Hayley. Oops, sorry, the other way. Perfect. And here you can see what I'm talking about when I mean things in context. So you can see what tenements have we got that are related to this agreement, what other agreements are related, and what is our landholder and land parcel that this agreement actually relates to. So all of that information is captured in context. Thanks, Hayley. And in terms of the benefits and the value of this, as I've kind of touched on that human IP element, and that's a really critical part of it. But we also see, in specific jurisdictions around Australia, the reports that our clients are required to run on stakeholder engagement are able to be generated at the touch of a button within PX4. So select a date range, all my stakeholder interactions for this project, download. It's as simple as that. All of those discussions can be captured in the field with our cloud-based system. So instead of sending an email back to HQ or writing a letter to yourself, you can record that conversation directly into PX4. And again, that contextual view ensures that anytime anyone in the organization is looking at an agreement or a stakeholder, you're looking at that agreement or that stakeholder with all of the relevant history as at that date. Thanks, Hayley. And in terms of PX4 software with Flare, that's us, and everything that we do here at PX4 makes compliance and your work life easier. So I'd love to grab any questions or speak more about any of the above. And thank you again to Austmine for the opportunity to present.
Thank you, Toby. That was great. Appreciate the content. And okay, next up, we've got Dan Hillier, who's Sales Director from VendorPanel. So a slightly different direction to the previous presentation. And over to you, Dan.
Thanks, Ross. So next slide, please. Today, we're going to look at VendorPanel's ESG supplier intelligence with AI. If we can move on. I'm going to touch on some of the challenges for procurement in the mining industry, quick look at VendorPanel and our go-to-market benefits, ESG supplier intelligence powered by givable AI data and the benefits of this solution, and hopefully we'll get time for a quick look at the product. Next slide. So, in terms of the challenges and opportunities for procurement in mining, maximising savings through procurement has always been important. Currently, mining and resource sectors continue to sort of push out of a downturn, and many companies are now looking for a new and more effective way to cut costs and to further improve operational efficiency. Balancing growth with social responsibility is critical, and having respectful and beneficial relationships with a variety of suppliers, including social and local enterprises plus indigenous businesses, while striving towards your emission reduction targets, continues to be a challenge. It's also an opportunity for the mining industry across the country. Supply chain disruptions are still an issue. Organisations are intensifying efforts to transform supply chains to better weather volatility and find new opportunities to boost efficiency, resiliency and transparency. Miners are considering more innovative, sophisticated approaches to mitigating supply chain risk, including through technology. Improving and building relationship with suppliers and collaborative procurement and contracting arrangements is of critical importance. Next slide. Further, and according to the 2023 Global Mining Survey conducted by EY, ESG continues to be the top risk and opportunity in the sector. Elements like decarbonisation, climate change and green production being the highest priority areas to be addressed. ESG is evolving and miners need to consider different issues and broaden capabilities to manage them effectively. And stakeholders are expecting miners to better assess the risks and opportunity and articulate these through transparent, outcome-based measurements and assurance. It's also now linked to longer-term performance. And if mining companies decide not to take ESG and sustainability seriously, they'll find it impossible to get funding, insurance, or a license to operate. So just jump to the next slide. So just a little bit about VendorPanel. We are APAC's most awarded and trusted source-to-contract solution. We help manage the challenges noted, that of getting value through procurement, delivering on ESG responsibility and needs, and management of supply chain challenges through our modular end-to-end solution. How do we do this? Well, our go-to-market procurement module allows you to manage your existing suppliers, discover and geolocate new suppliers, helping alleviate supply chain challenges. Further, ensuring when you do go to market, your suppliers' compliances and ESG credentials that are critical to your operating and reporting requirements are actually met. We deliver value through a competitive RFX process and smart evaluation tools, while increasing oversight, governance and visibility. Sourcing done through our go-to-market platform has also been shown to deliver cost avoidance of around 9.4% and save around 4.5 hours per RFX, which means your resources can actually focus on core business. And drilling in a little bit further, our solution does enable ESG and local supplier discovery down to specific postcodes. And this is through our local supplier marketplace, housing over 60,000 ABN validated suppliers. So we just jump to the next slide. We're going to take a look at the ESG supplier intelligence powered by our partner Giveable. So if we jump on forward, supplier intelligence allows us to dynamically augment supplier data at the exact point that buyers are making critical decisions, to provide more comprehensive understanding of the suppliers in their supply chain with supplier data that's relevant to your organisation. Augmenting supplier data at key points in the procurement process has been shown to positively change behaviours, support smarter procurement, and drive positive impacts and help address the noted challenges. So just on to the next slide. We know that creating ESG strategy and actually implementing it into your day-to-day operations are two different beasts. Our integrated solution allows you to actually deliver on this. It means that buyers can identify and engage with the right ESG suppliers at the point of purchase in a simple yet impactful way, driving positive change, sustainability, and economic outcomes. With the help of powerful AI, data is current and updated in real time, minimising risk and improving visibility. And our analytics tool allows you to see what sort of suppliers have been awarded work at any given time, meaning you don't have to wait till the end of the year to generate reports on supplier engagement. And it also allows you the agility and the room to pivot when required. We'll just jump to the next slide. So Giveable, our partner, is a multi-award-winning platform that uses powerful AI and data models to automate supplier sustainability diligence and process the categorization of over 1,500 supplier credentials into 6 key ESG themes. It's used by sustainability, procurement, and compliance professionals to track verified credentials and improve supplier performance. And it also provides users with data that they need to evaluate supplier performance beyond the traditional metrics and identify opportunities to improve their social and environmental impacts. Just onto the next slide, you can see that it's broken down into 6 key themes that are all relevant to the mining industry, focusing on community, ethical, environmental, social, diversity, and governance. And what does that mean for our users? If we go to the next slide, it means that our integrated solution means that ESG data is reliable, comprehensive, impactful, and reportable. The data is continuously refreshed and gathered from all public resources to provide a fully sustainable profile. And with easy identification, it's been proven to increase engagement with ESG suppliers and ultimately allow organisations to accurately show the number of suppliers with ESG credentials involved. On to the next slide, just a quick snapshot. You can see how it looks here. You can see your ESG credentials listed against your supplier details. And what that means is you can see those in advance in the buying decision. You can also drill into those supplier details to see the level of supplier credibility in that ESG space is and where those credentials actually come from. So hopefully that's given you a bit of a brief introduction to VendorPanel. On to the next slide. I'd just like to say thanks for the opportunity and look forward to your questions.
That's great. Thanks, Dan. Great content, great presentation, and on time. So thank you very appreciate that. Moving forward, we're going to have a look at we're going to hear about GeoMoby, and to give us that rundown, we've got the director, Matt Paul. So over to you, please, Matt.
Thanks, Ross. Thanks, Hayley, and everyone for being here this morning. So GeoMoby doesn't sound like it, but we're actually a company based in West Perth, born and bred in Perth. We are location intelligence specialists. So we've got a team of 15. We've been around for about 10 years, investing a lot in R&D over the past 10 years. And for us, it's all about providing our clients and all stakeholders, especially in that cultural heritage space, with a 360 degrees real-time view and visibility over assets, being people or plant and equipment at any given time. So whether you're underground or in the middle of desert, where a lot of, for instance, Aboriginal heritage sites are. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, we've noticed over the past 5-10 years a fair increase of registered sites that have been damaged across Australia. So this damage usually is due to inadequate protection measures. And most of the time, what would happen is illegal vandalism, accidental destruction during industrial activities, or when the land gets cleared at the beginning of operations. Next slide, please. It happens very often because right now we have on the market fairly ineffective ways to protect these sites. So most of you have heard that these sites are often marked with fluoro tape, wire, or even star pickets. You guess that anyone can remove these star pickets at any given time, or if the wind blows too strongly, it would then potentially just go. So we are in 2023. There are solutions to cater for that kind of issues. On the other hand, there has been historically balancing interests when it comes down to the preservation of Aboriginal cultural heritage, but cultural heritage in general, and environmental zones. Why is that? Because with the globalization, we do know that more mining is needed. So we will mine more and more, and we discover more and more places where mining can happen. And that's obviously a good thing. On the other hand, we do need to protect land, and we have that shared responsibility to mine smartly and responsibly. So balancing interests, ineffective protections, and sometimes because of that, a lack of commitment. So now in 2023, we believe at GeoMoby that a commitment needs to be made, and we also have solutions that I'm gonna go through with you that are ensuring that we don't have to live in the dark anymore. Next, please. So improving cultural heritage protection is essential to safeguard the rich history of the traditions of our nation. And like I just said, the responsibility falls with everyone that's involved. Next, please. I don't know if it's just me, but it's getting slow. No. All right. Cool. Yeah, so we need to be very proactive about that to make sure that all stakeholders, whether they are Aboriginal corporations, mining companies, explorers, farmers, agribusinesses, oil and gas companies, work all together alongside government regulators. Next, please. Introducing Protect. So Protect is derived from our core technology, so our location intelligence specialty. So imagine that historically, the market has had issues with different challenges. First was battery. So if you're pinging the location of someone at any given time for hours and hours, whatever you're carrying, so mobile phone or others, it would die within 2, 3, 4 hours. As a result, there was a need to come up with a technology that was catering for that issue. Second thing was the issue linked to the ability to work offline. So if you don't have any range, any connectivity, you need something that's gonna keep on monitoring what's going on in these protected areas. The third thing was the ability to keep on reporting on the data via a mechanism of collecting data, and then that get then buffered until your device reach range again, and all that data aggregates into your Power BI report or whatever business intelligence tool you're using for your ESG reporting. So that app that we've built that's gathering all that technology helps stakeholders understand in real time when people or assets or equipment is going into buffer zones or critical areas where they shouldn't be going into. There is, when such events happens, whether it's hopefully it's an accident, it's not on purpose. You'd have an orange alert, which is what you can see on the left side. So it's a warning. It's going to start screaming at you, giving you a noise, a buzz, a vibration, and instructions on what you need to do. When you go into the critical area, that's when it gets very serious and you need to immediately stop what you're doing. Next, please. So we need to embrace the future. The alerting systems, the ability to really understand what's going on is there now. There is no excuse in 2023 for not doing the right thing. And it doesn't mean that we need to reduce the speed at which we mine. Actually, having such technologies that are going to enable greater transparency across all stakeholders will enable the process to go faster. Next, please. So we've got a 30-day trials on offer today. So anyone that wants to join that trial, just please scan that QR code, and yeah, you'll be able to use Protect for the next month and experience the power of the technology. Next, please. Get in touch if you haven't had the time to scan that QR code. Just email me at matt@geomoby.com or otherwise I'll look forward to answer to the Q&A later today. Thank you.
Our final presentation comes from K2Fly, and we're pleased to have Brian Spence, who's the Natural Resource Governance Manager for K2Fly. So over to you, Brian.
Okay. Thank you, Ross. Just like to thank Ross, Haley, and Austmine for allowing us to be part of this webinar series. Appreciate that. So K2Fly is a publicly listed company on the Australian Stock Exchange. We provide enterprise-level governance, resource governance solutions to asset-intensive and extractive industries. Our solutions are all focused on ESG compliance, disclosure, and technical assurance. So next slide, please. So I guess I don't have to tell anyone who's on this call how complex this landscape actually is. We all know that legislation, regulation, reporting requirements, the need to be transparent, compliance, they're all increasing on a daily basis if you're looking at the news recently. So we also know that the implications of getting it wrong are very significant. And a lot of the pressure that's actually being applied comes from society and the community in general. Even things like global warming and decarbonization are driven by social acceptance. So for businesses, the one thing that's really happening is they need to now be much more than just being truthful. And what that means is they can't afford to omit important information, and they must provide evidence in ever-increasing levels of detail and accuracy. So I just thought I'd kind of highlight some of the other complexities that are involved in the fact that stakeholders that are part of this area are all coming at their issues from different perspectives, different cultural backgrounds, and they invariably have quite different requirements. They need to track their involvement in the process. They need to store relevant data or knowledge and potentially share that information. For example, mining proponents are required to repatriate data that they collect that's related to cultural knowledge back to traditional owners. So when you add in all the other stakeholder groups that are involved around ESG, the landscape is very complex. Next slide, please. So one of the things, we need to look at the interrelated issues that are at play here. You need to recognize those aspects. Tools are required to manage repeatable processes. It's essential to capture knowledge and be able to make it available through and adhere to relevant cultural protocols. It's not like you're dealing with just one source of approvals. I think that was mentioned earlier. The the approval landscape alone is, and the legislative landscape is very complex. It's not like a transactional system or accounting system where the rules are well defined. This area is changing constantly. And governance is critical to building confidence in the process. Next slide, please. So K2Fly integrates all the aspects of cultural heritage and community, land use, and ground disturbance permitting into one common platform. For example, we have stakeholder management, interactions and events. On the cultural heritage and community side, managing surveys, consultations, assessment activity, and the ability to capture that knowledge, whether it's tangible or intangible, in a common enterprise accessible data knowledge base. We also have capability to manage approvals, all the tenement management related admin and associated obligations side, as well as any third-party related agreements or access items that might be required. And we have an integrated ground disturbance process, which is an internal permitting process that allows organizations to ensure that the activity that they're planning has all the necessary approvals in place, and that those approvals are then consolidated into a common permit that the people on the ground can actually understand and work to. So we provide an enterprise repository with all of this data in it and all of the complex relationships that can exist in the background. You can come at that data from any direction, and ultimately the solution forms part of an organization's operational systems and governance processes, which provides visibility of activity, the location it's occurring in, the required and the received approvals, and governance necessary to ensure that that activity is appropriately authorized and work is completed. Next slide, please. So K2Fly solution platform is made up really of three main areas: the natural resource governance area, which I primarily work in, which includes cultural heritage and community, land access, ground disturbance, tailings management, and land rehabilitation, and other areas around mineral resource governance and technical assurance. So yeah, K2Fly has the expertise and the systems to help organizations govern their ESG risk. And I'd just like to thank everyone for joining us today and the opportunity to be part of this webinar. Thanks. Thanks, Ross.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Brian. There's a couple of questions. We'll now look at go through some of the questions. Don't have a lot come in as yet, so the good news is that the team's presented very well and thoroughly. But we do have a couple of questions to go through. If I just might start with Brian, whilst it's on my mind, you talk about an integrated solution, which is terrific when it's there, but implies possibly replacing a bunch of different solutions in previously different departments. So how is the change management a bit of a challenge?
I'd say it's not just a bit of a challenge, Ross. It's a big challenge. You've hit on one of probably the key areas in terms of implementation or managing change. There's no doubt that this is kind of equivalent to what happened in the 90s when people started implementing enterprise resource planning systems, ERP systems like SAP. You face the same issue here where all of the stakeholders involved have the best intentions to do the best they can in their area, but they're not used to playing together. And in fact, this requires everyone to be part of the same process, and that is a big challenge.
Indeed. Thank you. Let's go to the Q&A panel, and please to attendees forward us any questions that you do have. There's another one there for Brian from Rolf. Can you please expand on managing surveys?
Yeah, so I mean, sorry, Rolf, just on that, we have the capability to plan survey activity through desktop analysis to begin with, and then identifying the scopes of work that are required, getting out into the field and capturing the data that's relevant depending on the type of survey that's being conducted. So as you know, there are archaeological or ethnographic surveys and various types of consultations or assessments that can be undertaken in the field, and then bringing that data back in and populating it back into the central database. So we have the capability to I guess, govern that process and capture all of those events as they occur, and then relate that back against all sorts of things within the database. So I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Thank you, Brian. I might just pose a question to Dan about small suppliers. There's big capable suppliers, and then there's small local suppliers who do a job excellently at a site level. Is there any restrictions on the bringing those small suppliers in it, and then the workload, any workload that's needed on those small suppliers to be able to participate?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Ross. No is the answer. The local supplier marketplace is made up of tens of thousands of suppliers across Australia and New Zealand. It's been used by various mining organisations, particularly to find sort of remote suppliers in areas that they're working. So the fact that you can actually geolocate those particular suppliers in and around the regions that you're working has been seen as a bit of a godsend. And then obviously on top of that now, with the ability to sort of map out what those ESG requirements are for those particular suppliers through the platform at no cost to those suppliers is something that's a bit of a game changer in that space.
Thank you, Dan. And whilst you're off on mute, a question has come in from Jenny. What data sources does your partner pull their supplier info from? Where does the supplier credential information come from?
Yeah, sure. So it's all open source, all publicly available data. The credential partners and suppliers themselves can also provide it. However, it is all source data, so it is reviewed at that level, the source level. So you are getting accurate data at that point in time when the data is refreshed, which is quite regularly. And we use primary and secondary data sources to basically enrich that supplier business information.
Thank you. One question for Toby. So platform's terrific. How do the actions and the workflows for the different types of agreement actually get into the system? So it's obviously the details need to be there in order for the system to manage. So how does that happen? And then is it user can then manage everything themselves, or do they need help?
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Ross. In the first instance, like when you're walking yourself through, or when the system's walking you through that workflow, if you're starting an agreement from as you're just engaging with a party, the system will have pre-filled actions that kind of take you through the various steps of that agreement type. So if you're starting the negotiation phase, or even before the negotiation phase, the system will have actions saying, let's engage with the landowner, or engage with the stakeholder on the ground. And as that engagement occurs, have you got an agreement in place, yes or no? And once that agreement becomes executed, the system will ask a series of questions around, does it have an expiry? Is there an opportunity to extend or renew? So those actions would automatically be generated by the system. But given the breadth and the variance within a commercial agreement versus an Hillier, for example, or a land access agreement, the width or the variation of possible actions is so broad that it's hard for us to create just one set of actions that fits all. So the system allows you to create your own one-off or recurring action within an agreement or within multiple agreements. And that functionality is available across the whole of the system. So, same with our stakeholder communications. Do you have to do a weekly follow-up for a month? Do you have to, touch base with a landowner once every 6 weeks? Those types of things can be created against all, or, just one project, or just against one individual agreement or stakeholder.
So intuitive to a degree, but also flexible to the, as you say, the variability that you come across.
Exactly.
We don't have any other questions in the box, but I'll just finish with a question from Matt. Again, in terms of the geo-positioning and fencing, the communications when there were breaches, how are those? Is that I suppose similar to the last question? Is that a standard in the system, or are local standards able to be entered into your product?
So yeah, so we work. You mean in terms of data source?
Yeah, sort of what is the zone, what is the distance, yep. what is the leeway, what's the tolerance type stuff? Are they set, or are they can be established by local standards?
Yeah, so our process when we start working on a project, so with the clients, whether the clients got one project, an exploration project, or one farm, or one mine, or dozens, the first step would be to first use or load all the publicly available data onto their platform. So if they are operating in WA, we would use the data we've got for WA that's publicly available, load it into the data account. Second, we would inject in the platform all the geofences, so the geospatial data that our clients provide us. That data usually comes from years of working on their own database. So for instance, Rio Tinto would have about, I think, 13,000 plus fences. BHP would have about 6, FMG about 8,000. So we're not talking about, just 5 geofences. So we would give you an idea of size. So we'd use that private data and inject it into their accounts. That would take just a few seconds, believe it or not. And then within a few minutes, we've got all these fences across the areas where they operate. But before we inject it, we ask them whether the buffer zone that's around the breach area should be of replicating the same shape of the breach area, or if it should be a circle or rectangle or whatever, if it should be 5 meters wide or 200 meters wide or whatever it is. So it's highly customizable. And even after you've injected all these geofences into the system, you can modify them on the fly. And all the modifications, they are recorded, a bit like blockchain, if you want. We've got that history of changes that are made as you go. So so the data in a nutshell is private, and each client manages its own data. It's never going to be shared with anyone else.
Thank you, Matt. Well, that wraps up our questions. I think you'll note each of the presenters did share their contacts and contact details. So for any further conversations or inquiries for each of those organisations, please feel free to reach out. And if you didn't have them, come through Austmine. So I hope you've enjoyed the webinar today. I'd like to, that wraps up the community mine. If we move forward with our our ESG showcase series. We've got the Smart Water Mine, which is scheduled for later this month on the 22nd of August, the Intelligent Mine on the 12th of September, and the Zero Carbon Mine on the 11th of, that must be October. It's masked on my screen, my apologies. Thank you to everyone who attended, much appreciated. We look forward to welcoming you for the next Austmine webinar. And a big thank you to Brian, to Dan, to Toby, to Matt for putting a significant amount of effort into your presentations and joining us today. Thanks, Harley, for keeping us on track, and wish everyone a good day. Thanks for joining.
Thanks.